Emotiva has been in the business of making high-quality home theater speakers and components for a long time, and they've always had great options if you want to put together a modest home theater at a great price. But today, we're going to be taking a look at something a little less modest. This is the Airmotiv 3 series, which is Emotiva's newest line of home theater speakers, and as you can see, they're a lot different from anything else that we reviewed here before. So if you want to see what makes these so special, then stick around and we'll get into it right after the intro. Alright, so as I mentioned, today we're going to be taking a look at some new speakers from Emotiva. In the past, we've done reviews on some of their other speakers, like the T1 Plus towers and the C1 Plus center channel, which are really great options if you want to put together a surround sound system in a living room or small dedicated theater room. But for this review, Emotiva decided to send us their new T3 Plus towers, along with the C3 Plus center channel and A2 Plus surround sound ATMOS speakers. And again, all of these are part of their new 3 series, which are big speakers designed for larger spaces. So let's go ahead and get started with the specs of these T3 Plus towers, which we've been testing as the front, left, and right channels. These speakers are a ported 3-way design with Emotiva's custom 32mm folded ribbon tweeter, dual 5¼ fiber mid-ranges, each with a metal phase plug, and 3 8-inch bass drivers, which according to Emotiva give these a frequency response between 29 Hz and 28,000 Hz. The tweeter and mid-range drivers are all the same across the entire line of Emotiva speakers, so no matter how you configure your system, you'll always end up with a perfect tonal match throughout your room. And of course, at right around 50 inches high by 12 inches wide and 17 inches deep, the T3 Plus towers are a pretty impressive pair of speakers. These massive 85-pound speakers are built using HDF panels rather than MDF like a lot of other companies will use. This, along with plenty of internal bracing throughout, combine to make this a very acoustically inert enclosure. Now, obviously with speakers of this size with this many drivers, it's probably a good assumption that you're going to need some decent power to drive them. Emotiva recommends giving these 4-ohm speakers at least 100 watts per channel and 250 watts continuously with a maximum of 500 watts peak. We recommend pairing these with some high-quality amplifiers to get the best sound possible. We tried to hit both ends of Emotiva's recommended power spectrum by using our 125 watt Marantz monoblocks in our living room and our Emotiva UPA-1 monoblocks in the main theater. These put out around 350 watts at 4 ohms, and to us there was a noticeable difference moving to the more powerful amps. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the sound quality. On the back, you can also see that these towers have bi-amp and bi-wire terminals with 2 sets of binding posts. And above those, we have 2 rear-firing ports, so you'll have to make sure that you get a good amount of clearance behind these speakers to get the best bass response possible. And as with all Airmotiv speakers, the front baffle has these angles cut into it, which helps to minimize diffraction. And the whole baffle is finished with this really nice satin black lacquer. The sides of the cabinet are covered with this vinyl finish that has an attractive leather look to it. I personally really like this material because it's durable and it has a non-reflective matte finish. To stabilize the towers, Emotiva uses feet that extend out the sides a few inches and are threaded to accept these heavy floor spikes. One thing that I've always appreciated from Emotiva is the fact that they include magnetic grills with almost all of their speakers. This is kind of a sticking point for me because I reviewed quite a few speakers from other brands that were relatively expensive but only came with regular pin and cup grills. The reason I don't care for this type of grill is they can be hard to get on and off and in some cases can break way too easily. Now, you may have noticed that I just said that almost all of their speakers come with magnetic grills, and I say that because some don't, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the video. Alright, so we've talked about the new T3 Plus towers, but Emotiva couldn't just come out with a new pair of flagship speakers without releasing an equally impressive center channel to go with them. The C3 Plus is the biggest center channel speaker that Emotiva has ever sold, and I'm pretty sure it's the biggest center channel I've ever actually seen in person. This thing is 55 inches wide, and under my 85-inch TV, it honestly looks a little ridiculous in a good kind of way. But even if it looks a little overpowering here in my living room, there's a good reason why Emotiva decided to make a center channel this big. By using 4 6.5-inch woofers on each side of the speaker, they were able to get bass response that can match the towers without adding too much extra height that might block the bottom edge of your TV or projector screen, which could be the case if they would have gone with the larger 8-inch drivers. One thing that I really like about this center channel and tower combo is that Emotiva decided to use the exact same mid-range and tweeter in an MTM configuration. This essentially gives you the same sound signature between all of the speakers in the mids and highs, so you'll basically end up with perfect tonality across the entire front stage. Power-wise, you're going to want to provide this center channel with about 200 watts continuous and 300 watts peak, preferably from an amp that can easily handle a 4-ohm load. And like with the towers, the more good clean power that you put into these, the more good clean sound you'll get out of them. For surround and ATMOS duty, Emotiva sent us their new A2 Plus height speakers, which can work either as side or rear mounted surround sound channels, or ATMOS height channels that you could mount higher up on your wall or on your ceiling. And if you're in a scenario where you might not be able to mount your speakers properly, they could also be used as up-firing ATMOS channels. And once again, as with the rest of the Airmotiv line, you're getting that high-quality HDF cabinet with the same nice finishes, folded ribbon tweeter, 5.25-inch carbon fiber mid-range, and everything else that you would expect, with the exception of the magnetic grills. Earlier in this review, I mentioned that almost all of Emotiva's speakers came with magnetic grills, but for some reason the A2 Plus are the only Airmotiv speakers that have pin and cup grills, which seems like an inconvenience for speakers that you might be mounting on your ceiling, so we're going to have to dock them a few points for that. But what do you guys think? Are we being a little too critical here about something that may not matter to most people? Do you even care about magnetic grills? Let us know if this is a big deal or if it's not really a problem to you by commenting down below. The A2 Pluses do come with these heavy-duty metal mounting brackets though, which have a pair of pins on the bottom that you slide the speaker into and secure with 2 screws on the other side. This should make them really easy to mount, whether you're putting them on walls or ceiling. Alright, so with all the technical stuff out of the way, let's talk about our setup for testing these speakers and how this system sounds to our ears. We first set these speakers up in our dedicated home theater room using the IOTA AVX17 to handle the ATMOS audio processing. To power the bed level speakers, we used Emotiva UPA1 monoblocks for the front stage, along with 2 channels of our XPA5 to power the A2 Plus surrounds. I should also mention that we disconnected all of our other speakers and subwoofers while evaluating this system. In our acoustically treated theater, these speakers get the advantage of having plenty of room to sound their best, since we have the space to position the speakers far enough apart. Having a room that's wider than it is deep is also perfect for the very wide dispersion of the center channel. Playing movies from both our NVIDIA Shield Pro and Sony UBP X800 4K Blu-ray player, we felt these new speakers handled themselves incredibly well. Overall, we feel like the Emotiva front stage had a very wide and open sound that had no problem filling our large home theater. The ribbon tweeters in all of these Airmotiv speakers also do a really good job at offering plenty of revealing detail without sounding bright or fatiguing, and they get plenty loud for our tastes. And as we mentioned, because they use the same tweeter and mid-range throughout the entire front stage, sounds panning across the front LCR channels also sounded perfect. Another very strong point of these speakers was the bass response. Since the T3 Plus towers each have 3 8-inch woofers, you can easily run them at full range, and they offer more than enough low-end output that you can get away without using a subwoofer. With that said, we're always going to recommend getting a subwoofer or 2 if you want to get the best movie watching experience possible. All of this led us to what we can best describe as having a very big sound. Bass was tight and articulate, the mid-range was crystal clear, and the highs were open and detailed. It was almost as if the soundstage were extending past our walls, and sound was coming from the actual scene in the movie rather than just from the speakers. Now, aside from the towers, the center channel is probably one of the most important speakers in a home theater, and the C3 Plus does a really good job there too. The mid-range and tweeter gave us excellent vocal clarity, and it seemed like it had slightly better dispersion in my room than my $3,000 Vandersteen center channel. The A2 Plus speakers also did a great job pulling surround sound duty. They matched the sound signature of the front stage and blended perfectly, which is pretty much all we can ask for, since there isn't nearly as much information going to these channels. And since the A2 Pluses perform so well as surround channels, we're confident that they'll sound equally as good for Dolby Atmos and DTS:X height channels. Now, although we're mostly a home theater channel, we don't think it would be fair to evaluate these speakers without seeing just how well they would do with music. And it was here that the T3 Pluses really had a chance to shine, offering some very impressive musical and articulate bass response. Vocals sounded open and lifelike without any kind of veil or boxiness to the sound in any of the tracks that we tested. Now, this really wasn't any kind of a surprise to us, considering how good these speakers sounded with movies, but it's nice to know that they can perform extremely well in a dedicated stereo setup. With that said, once the main testing was done, just for the heck of it, we wanted to see what these speakers would sound like in our smaller, untreated room, so we brought them back down into our living room to watch some more movies. And while I think the speakers still offered really good sound, we felt like they were a little more constrained here. Obviously, due to the smaller room and having to load the speakers into one corner, this is far from an ideal setup where we would have liked to have given them more breathing room by spacing them further apart. We were also powering the speakers with these less capable Marantz amps, which didn't provide as much power as we would have liked. At 125 watts, this is just slightly above the minimum amplifier power that Emotiva recommends running these speakers with. All of this resulted in a slightly less impactful bass response with somewhat reduced output compared to our theater room, but again, they still sounded really good considering the circumstances. So in the end, we feel that Emotiva is offering a lot of value with a ton of performance at this level of home theater speaker. These come in at right around $3,300 for the whole 5-channel system, which by no means is cheap, but if you're looking for a high-end, great-sounding, no-compromise home theater system, we really feel you'd be hard-pressed to find anything better than the new Airmotiv 3 series. And we highly recommend checking these speakers out. If you want to learn more about these speakers and any of the other products that Emotiva offers, like their excellent line of amplifiers, processors, and more, then make sure to check out the link in the video description so you don't miss out. If you have any questions or comments on the Emotiva Airmotiv series speakers, then please let us know down in the comments below. If you thought this video was helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.